To truly understand where Vinicius Jr.'s hidden fury comes from, and why he reacts to the outside world the way he does today, we need to erase every trace of the Santiago Bernabeu's glamour from our minds. Forget the contracts worth tens of millions of euros. Forget the luxury cars and the flashbulbs of the world's leading sports magazines. We need to go back to São Gonçalo. This is not just a suburb of Rio de Janeiro. For years, it was a place synonymous in Brazil's crime reports with poverty, staggering levels of street violence, and a complete absence of any future worth believing in. Here, in the endless labyrinth of unfinished red brick and open sewers, children learn to survive before they learn to read. Vinicius's family lived in conditions that break most people before their character has even had a chance to form. His father, a simple construction worker, was forced to travel thousands of kilometers to São Paulo to find any work at all, leaving his mother alone with the children in a tiny house where every cent was accounted for. The family literally counted the days to the next money transfer just to buy the basics. In an environment like that, a child quickly absorbs one brutal lesson. The world around you is hostile by default. Show weakness, drop your eyes, let them sense your fear, and the street ecosystem will crush you. Vinicius found his defense mechanism. That mechanism was his now famous, almost cartoonish smile, which he never took off. But in the favelas, a smile is not a sign of genuine happiness. It is a mask, a shield you hold up against the gangs on the next street over, signaling that everything is fine and you are not afraid of their pressure. When Vinicius joined a Flamengo Academy branch at the age of 6, his coaches immediately noticed something unusual. He did not just beat his peers thanks to his freakish genetic pace. He did it provocatively, mockingly. He would chip the ball over a defender's head, spin tricks on the spot when there was no tactical reason to, purely out of defiance. For young Vinny, football was not a rigid tactical system. It was the only space where he held absolute, unbounded power over other human beings. On the dusty pitch of São Gonçalo, he was not a poor boy from a large, struggling family. He was a king who made grown men fall to their knees. His progress was so rapid that Real Madrid scouts began tracking him when he was barely 14. When the Royal Club officially announced his transfer at a staggering 45 million euros, a figure that seemed to the people of São Gonçalo like the budget of a small nation, Vinicius believed he had cracked life open. He decided that if the rules of the street had carried him out of poverty, they would carry him through the pitches of old Europe too. He did not yet understand that the European football establishment operates by entirely different, far more cynical laws. This world loves Brazilians, as long as they remain charming, exotic entertainers dancing at its carnival. But it begins to genuinely despise them the moment they stop obeying and start dictating their own terms. But what happens when this boy, raised on unconditional love at home, finds himself alone against tens of thousands of European fans demanding instant results? And why were his first and most savage executioners in Madrid not rival supporters, but the very men who shared his dressing room? We break that down right now. The move to Madrid in the summer of 2018 was a shattering existential blow to an 18-year-old kid. Head coach Julen Lopetegui, himself under ferocious pressure following the departures of Zinedine Zidane and Cristiano Ronaldo, made clear that the Brazilian newcomer was nowhere near ready for the first team. Instead of packed La Liga stadiums, Vinicius was sent to the reserve side, Castilla, competing in Spain's third tier. Try for a moment to picture the mental state of this boy. Your transfer made global headlines. Back in Brazil, they call you the heir to Neymar. Millions of Flamengo fans pray for you. And here you are, playing in half-empty grounds in Spanish provincial towns, where defenders earning a couple of €1,000 a month deliberately and brutally hack you because you had the nerve to show them your stepovers. In one match, the Atletico Madrid B captain Tachi literally bit Vinicius on the head during a challenge. It was the first unambiguous signal. Welcome to Europe, kid. Nobody here was waiting for you. When Santiago Solari finally gave Vinicius a chance with the senior squad, a second circle of this Madrid hell began. He had everything: explosive pace, extraordinary dribbling, the ability to create danger out of nothing. But his finishing was not just poor. It was catastrophic. He could dribble past 3 Barcelona defenders, arrive one-on-one with Ter Stegen, and then blast the ball toward the corner flag, or collapse in a tangle of his own legs. The Spanish media machine fired up instantly. The country's leading sports papers, Marca and AS, ran scathing weekly columns. But the center of the storm was the iconic television show El Chiringuito. Pundits spent hours gleefully dissecting every mistake he made. An unprecedented internet campaign was launched against him. Social media was flooded with thousands of memes. They called him Vinicius, implying he was the dead end of every real attack. They compared him to a wooden mannequin. Fans of his own club winced openly at his every touch. The pressure was so suffocating that a psychological block took hold. Whenever he received the ball in the box, he would physically begin to panic. But the most devastating, most treacherous blow came from the place where he expected protection: inside his own dressing room. Late October 2020, a Champions League group stage match against Borussia Mönchengladbach. Real are losing 0-2. At half-time, cameras from France's Telefoot channel catch a corridor conversation between star striker Karim Benzema and left-back Ferland Mendy. In French, Benzema says, openly, "Brother, don't pass to him. I swear on my mother. He's playing against us. He does whatever he wants out there, totally switched off." Vinicius was standing 2 meters away. He barely understood French at that point. But from the tone, from the way Mendy avoided his eyes, he understood everything. The man he had treated as his primary mentor at Madrid had publicly dismantled him in front of his teammates. In the second half, Benzema demonstratively ignored him on the left flank, refusing to play him in even once. This was the absolute rock bottom. The whole world saw him as an expensive, useless Brazilian misfire. Lesser players with more stable psychologies have broken under far less. He could have shut down, demanded a transfer, disappeared on loan to some mid-table side, and quietly vanished from the radar of elite football forever. But this is precisely where the favela trigger of São Gonçalo fired. Cornered completely, his smile turned into a cold, hard snarl. Instead of depression, rage was born. He overhauled his entire life. He hired a team of personal fitness coaches, nutritionists, physiotherapists, and a French-speaking sports psychologist. He locked himself in his house and worked harder than he ever had in his life. And when Carlo Ancelotti returned to Madrid in the summer of 2021, he did not find a meme boy in the dressing room. He found a mental assassin. But alongside that incredible form and that new clinical precision, something else had awakened inside Vinicius: the desire for revenge. revenge against every journalist, every studio pundit, every fan who had laughed at his failures. And that hunger for payback was so powerful it would soon turn him into the most toxic player in European football. The 2021-22 season entered football history as one of the most spectacular examples of individual reinvention. Vinicius Jr. delivered phenomenal numbers, 22 goals and 20 assists across all competitions. It was his precise finish in Paris that handed Real Madrid their 14th Champions League trophy. Karim Benzema, who barely a year earlier had told his teammates not to pass to the Brazilian, publicly embraced him and called him the best winger on the planet. From the butt of every joke, Vinicius had become an untouchable superstar overnight. And it was precisely at this moment of triumph that his psychological armor developed a deep, dangerous crack. Having gained enormous influence and untouchable status at Real Madrid, Vinicius began using his footballing genius not for football itself, but to settle old scores. His goal celebrations, which initially seemed like innocent Brazilian samba, quickly became instruments of open humiliation directed at opponents. This was not a celebration of success. It was a manifesto to the stands. You laughed at me when I missed. Now watch me humiliate your team on your own ground. In September 2022, before the Madrid derby, Atletico captain Koke issued a measured but firm warning. If Vinicius scores and decides to dance in front of our ultras at the Metropolitano, there will be serious problems. That will be read as pure disrespect. Vinicius ignored every word. He scored. He danced. The stadium detonated in a wave of hatred. The Spanish press, which had been celebrating him the day before, began accusing him of calculated arrogance. But his response, and that of his PR team, was a masterstroke of narrative manipulation. They instantly reframed a purely sporting conflict as one of racial discrimination. They hate my dancing not because it's disrespectful. They hate it because I am a black Brazilian man who succeeded in Europe, the player declared. From that moment, the Vinicius, the manipulator, was born. He had grasped that the subject of racism in the modern world is an absolute, impenetrable shield, behind which any destructive behavior can be concealed. On the pitch, he stopped being merely an athlete. He became an actor, constantly seeking confrontation. Defenders across La Liga, realizing how easy it was to knock him off balance, began deliberately goading him with cynical fouls. But Vinicius's reactions went far beyond any sporting code. He began simulating with alarming regularity. The slightest contact with his legs became a Shakespearean drama of collapses and screaming across the entire stadium. Worse still, he began openly demeaning his opponents. During matches against modest clubs like Cadiz or Osasuna, Spanish television cameras regularly caught him at it, walking up to defenders who earned less in a year than he made in a week and saying to their faces with a smirk, "You're terrible. You play in this dump. I could buy your whole family tomorrow." He stopped respecting referees. Vinicius became the only player in modern La Liga who could run at an official, wave his arms in the man's face, scream expletives inches away, and not receive a straight red card, simply because referees were terrified of accusations of bias. In the match against Mallorca, defender Pablo Maffeo shadowed him for 90 minutes, gesturing to the stands that the Brazilian was behaving like a crying baby. The crowd jeered his every touch, but instead of punishing Maffeo through football, Vinicius spent the full 90 minutes arguing with fans ostentatiously pointing to the Real Madrid crest on his shirt and tapping his temple. He was deliberately lighting stadium after stadium across Spain on fire, turning every real away day into a poisonous talk show where football grew smaller and hatred grew bigger. But what had seemed like ordinary football provocation exploded in May 2023 at Valencia's Mestalla Stadium into something far larger. The events of that day permanently altered Spain's legal system and simultaneously destroyed any chance Vinicius had of becoming the world's most beloved player. So what exactly happened inside the Mestalla that night? 21st of May 2023. This date permanently divided Spanish football into before and after. The match between Valencia and Real Madrid at the Mestalla had been played in an atmosphere of extreme aggression from the opening whistle. The Mestalla stands are known for their ferocity, but that evening they crossed a line. In the 73rd minute, as Vinicius made another run down the flank, a clear and sustained chorus of racist abuse rained down from the terraces. And here, the boy from the favelas finally tore off his footballer's mask entirely. Vinicius stopped the play. He refused to attack. He turned, walked to the advertising boards along the south stand, and raised his arm, pointing directly at one specific individual in the crowd. His face was a mask of rage and tears. I can see you! You called me a monkey!" he screamed, as teammates tried to hold him back from vaulting into the seats. The match was halted for nearly 10 minutes. The referee activated La Liga's official anti-racism protocol. Warning announcements echoed around the stadium. The captain and Carlo Ancelotti rushed to Vinicius. Ancelotti could see his player was on the edge of complete emotional breakdown. His hands were visibly shaking. The manager begged him to come off, to go inside, and protect himself. Vinicius refused. He shouted at his manager, "No, I will stay. I will see this through to the end." In added time, a mass brawl erupted on the pitch. Valencia players, defending their goal, formed a wall against the Madrid contingent. At the heart of the melee, Valencia defender Hugo Duro ran up behind Vinicius, wrapped his arm around the Brazilian's neck, and held him in a chokehold for several seconds. Trying to break free, Vinicius swung his arm back and caught Duro's face with his elbow. What happened next shocked Real Madrid's board to its core. Referee de Burgos Bengoeche went to review the VAR monitor, but the video official in the review room, Ignacio Iglesias Villanueva, deliberately showed the referee only a truncated clip, the moment where Vinicius elbows Duro, with the actual chokehold completely excised from the footage. The referee returned to the pitch and showed Vinicius a red card. The Brazilian walked off to deafening, mocking jeers. As he disappeared down the tunnel, he turned to the Valencia stands and raised 2 fingers, the segunda gesture, implying the club deserved relegation to the 2nd division. That same night, Vinicius published a statement on social media that elevated the conflict to a geopolitical dimension. Racism is the norm in La Liga. The league's leadership treats it as natural, and Spain is now known in Brazil as a country of racists. The post triggered a colossal international scandal. Brazilian President Lula da Silva interrupted his official press conference at the G7 summit in Japan to express solidarity with the footballer. The Brazilian government formally requested an explanation from Madrid's authorities, and the Brazilian consulate in Spain extinguished all its external lighting as a mark of protest. This was a moment of absolute, unconditional triumph for Vinicius. as a victim. Global public opinion stood with him. Under pressure from FIFA and sponsors, La Liga was forced to begin real reform. The VAR official who had manipulated the clip was dismissed the following day. And in June 2024, a Spanish court handed down an unprecedented verdict. The 3 Valencia supporters identified by Vinicius received 8 months of actual imprisonment and a 2-year stadium ban. It was the first time in Iberian sporting history that anyone had gone to jail for racist abuse in a football ground. Vinicius Jr. had achieved something genuinely great. He became an icon of the fight for the rights of black athletes in Europe, placed alongside Muhammad Ali. But that very status of absolute media untouchability then fully corrupted him as a sportsman. Armed with that weapon, the Vinicius the manipulator began using it to excuse any sin he committed on the pitch. From that moment on, every referee's whistle against him, every opponent's gesture, every crowd booing an obvious dive, all of it the Brazilian began framing exclusively as racism. When the crowd at Real Sociedad Stadium in San Sebastián groaned at him for obviously fishing for a penalty, Vinicius converted the spot kick, ran to the stand, and demonstratively pressed a finger to his lips, silencing them. Then, in the post-match interview, he told international press that if Spain did not change its treatment of him within a few years, it should be stripped of the right to host the 2030 World Cup. And that sentence, from a man the Spanish public had rallied behind after Mestalla, they did not forgive. In millions of eyes, the noble fighter for justice had become a pampered egotist, blackmailing an entire nation, using a great social tragedy as a personal get-out-of-jail card for his own reckless behavior. But the racist chants of fringe fans in the stands were only the visible part of the iceberg. Behind the scenes of Spanish football, a far more sophisticated, professional, and filthy war was being waged against the Brazilian. One involving the executives of the country's largest television networks. And the way Vinicius was blackmailed live and on air reveals this story from an entirely different angle. In the autumn of 2022, a bomb detonated inside Spain's media landscape that the major networks worked furiously to defuse. Independent Spanish journalist Iñaki Angulo published a sweeping exposé accusing the leadership of the country's most-watched football show, El Chiringuito, of direct brazen blackmail of Vinicius Jr. The sequence of events was as follows. After the show's studio pundit, Pedro Bravo, said on air, referring to Vinicius, "If you want to dance samba, go to the carnival in Rio, but here you need to stop acting like a monkey." Those close to the Brazilian decided to release an official video statement, harshly condemning the commentator. When senior El Chiringuito producers, including host Josep Pedrerol, learned of this, they contacted Vinicius's PR team directly. Their message was brief and absolute. "If that video goes out and names our show, we will destroy Vinicius. We will launch a daily press campaign against him that will make his life in Madrid a living hell. We will publish material that will ruin his reputation permanently." Vinicius refused to submit to the media giant's blackmail. The video was released, and the Spanish hate industry duly powered up to full capacity. His every step, his every obscene gesture at a referee, his every spit on the turf was examined under a microscope in prime-time broadcasts, with professional physiognomists and lip-reading experts brought in to testify. The image of the ultimate, absolute supervillain of world football was being systematically and daily constructed around this Brazilian. And that coordinated media campaign produced its bitterest, most devastating result for Vinicius in October 2024. In purely footballing terms, the 2023-24 season was Vinicius Jr.'s complete and total masterclass. After Benzema's departure, he assumed unchallenged leadership of Real Madrid. He single-handedly dismantled Girona in the decisive title match. He scored a hat-trick in the Super Cup final against Barcelona. He delivered in the Champions League semi-final against Bayern, and put the seal on the Wembley final against Dortmund. Not one expert on the planet had any doubt. The 2024 Ballon d'Or belonged to him by absolute right. A month before the ceremony, every credible insider, including Fabrizio Romano, had officially confirmed it. Nike had prepared a special golden boot collection and had scheduled a full refit of their flagship Madrid store on the Gran Via. But this year, the France Football Ballon d'Or organisers ran a significant experiment. For the first time, they aligned with UEFA and tightened the voting criteria. The ballots sent to 100 leading sports journalists from the top 100 FIFA-ranked countries now clearly specified 3 criteria. Criterion 1, individual achievement and contribution to team victories. Here, Vinicius had no rivals. But Criterion 3 stated, in plain language, the player's class and commitment to the principles of fair play, as well as their conduct on and off the pitch. And when journalists from Argentina to New Zealand sat down to fill in their ballots, it was not only his genius goal against Liverpool or his Dortmund hat-trick that stood before their eyes. It was hundreds of video clips in which Vinicius Jr. mocks defenders from struggling clubs, shoves Leipzig's Willi Orban by the neck in a moment that should have earned a straight red card, dives, screams obscenities in referees' faces, and silences entire stadiums. The media image of a capricious, toxic manipulator, hiding behind the vital social cause of racism, had completely outweighed his brilliant footballing skills. A significant block of European and South American journalists, exhausted by his destructive behaviour on the pitch, reached a collective decision to teach the Brazilian a lesson. They did not simply place Rodri above him. Many did not include Vinicius in their top 5, or even their top 10 at all, wiping out his chances entirely. When Real Madrid's leadership learned of the vote results a few hours before the Paris flight, they made the decisive, strategic mistake. The club staged a hysterical, childish boycott, forbidding the entire delegation from attending the Châtelet Theatre. That walkout cemented once and for all in the public mind the image of Vinicius as a spoiled child throwing a tantrum because he wasn't given his favourite toy. He lost the greatest individual prize of his career, not because Manchester City's Rodri had delivered a more spectacular season. He lost it because Rodri had conducted himself like a champion and a role model throughout that season, while Vinicius had conducted himself like a street provocateur from the favelas who, despite earning hundreds of millions, had never learned basic respect for the game or for the people in it. So who is Vinicius Jr. truly in this complex and tangled story? If you call him a calculated, cold-blooded manipulator, you will be profoundly wrong. No one can endure the level of racist pressure, the relentless jeering of entire stadiums, the professional blackmail from media conglomerates, and emerge a calm, rational machine. He genuinely is a victim of the deep psychological wound of the São Gonçalo favelas, where he was taught, if you don't strike first, you will be destroyed. A victim of a European football system that ignored xenophobia on its terraces for decades until the situation became a crisis point. Vinicius simply built a thick wall of arrogance, egotism, and aggression around his deeply vulnerable psychology. It is his body armor, and without it, he physically cannot walk onto a football pitch. But if you call him simply an innocent, saintly victim, you make an even greater error. Vinicius Jr. turned out to be a very quick learner. He rapidly understood how the modern media world works, and he learned to monetize his grievances. He transformed a real, profound social tragedy, racism, into a personal political instrument, a shield behind which he conceals his own lack of discipline, his contempt for fellow professionals, and his open disrespect toward supporters. He became a prisoner of his own dark image, a man so consumed by his war with the world that he simply did not notice the world turning its back on him at the most important moment of his career. His story is a classic, cinematic tragedy about how great, transcendent genius can be utterly consumed by the fire of an uncontrolled ego. Vinicius Jr. will certainly win more team trophies, score hundreds more breathtaking goals, and earn another €1 billion in endorsement deals. But the most important recognition in any great athlete's life, the genuine, unconditional love of ordinary, neutral supporters around the world, he seems to have lost forever. All we can do now is watch and ask, will this man ever manage to take off his heavy supervillain mask and simply smile at football again, the way he smiled on the dusty concrete pitches of São Gonçalo? Which of these two sides of Vinicius's personality feels closer to the truth for you? Was the France football decision on the Ballon d'Or a fair lesson in sportsmanship? Or was the Brazilian flat-out robbed for the hardness of his political stance? Write your verdict in the comments below this video. I read every single message and personally engage with the most heated debates. If this kind of deep, unsparing documentary filmmaking is what you're here for, if you want to understand the true psychological and financial motives driving the world's greatest athletes and the corporations surrounding them, then subscribe to the channel right now, like this investigation, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. We are only just beginning to strip the gloss off football's empires. Click on the video you see on your screen now.